Good afternoon. My name is Vered Nochi, and I am Executive Director of the Philadelphia Israel Chamber and PICC Foundation. We're pleased to host you today for a program about circular economy and what it is and how your business can benefit of that. I am excited to host you today, as well as host a panel of speakers from Matt Taylor. He's our board member and partner at Permit Capital, and he will introduce our speakers, Emily Yates and Sharon Artsy, in a few minutes. PICC is an independent nonprofit that has been in the Philadelphia region for almost 40 years. We connect Israeli and Greater Philadelphia, Southern New Jersey, Delaware companies for joint ventures focusing on innovation. This is our first program of the year, launching a sustainability event series. And this event and the following will be virtual, and afterwards we hope to meet you in person. I would also like to mention that we represent the U.S.-Israel Binational Industrial R&D Foundation, or in short, it's BIRD. And if you are interested in pursuing the up to $1.5 million grant, please contact us. We can help connect you to Israeli innovators, and you can innovate in sustainability or anything else. I would like to also thank the event planning committee. We have here the chair, Todd Abrams, our board member, as well as John Churchill, Matt Taylor, and Karina Sotnik. If you wish to help us organize event, please contact Todd or me later on. Also thanking our partners in promoting this event, Circular Philadelphia and Delaware Sustainable for Chemistry Alliance, two great organizations. Without further ado, let me see, I'm admitting another few people here. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. Matt Taylor is a partner at Permit Capital Advisors and a board member of the Philadelphia Israel Chamber of Commerce. Permit Capital Advisors is an independent employee-owned investment advisory firm based in suburban Philadelphia. It focuses on the investment needs of institutions and high net worth investors, serving as passionate advocates for those who entrust them. Prior to Permit, Matt was partner and portfolio manager at Chess World Lane Asset Management LLC, an international equity firm which he co-founded in 2006. Previously, he was a partner and portfolio manager at Chess World Investment Partners. At Chess World, he managed US large cap value equity portfolios, including the Chess World Dividend Income Fund. Earlier, Matt worked at Miller Anderson and shared as a member of the portfolio management team of the Morgan Stanley Dividend Growth Fund, and as a research analyst on the Morgan Stanley Institutional Value Trust. Prior experience includes Prudential Investment and Prudential International Investment, UMS Group, and Fidelity Investment. I have to mention that the best thing about Matt is he's always open-minded to innovation. We traveled with him on a mission to Israel as he was scouting for opportunities. If you're interested to hear more about opportunities with the PICC and investment in Israeli companies, go to Matt. He's an expert on impact and sustainability investments. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt Taylor.
Thank you very much, Vered. And I am just so excited for the conference series, not just for our discussion today, but actually for the full year of events we have around circular economy and sustainability and innovation. And really, I think you'll hear today that innovation is the foundation of what we are trying to uncover in the circular economy. So I'm very excited to have Sharon Artsy, who is the founder and managing director of the Israeli Circular Economy Stakeholders Platform, and was the Israeli representative in the Circular Economy Expert Group at the UN Industrial Development Organization. She's a partner at a law firm, Fisher & Co. in Israel, where she heads the environmental, climate change, and circular economy practice. She has been an active promoter and supporter of Israeli stakeholders, looking at transitions in the economy to circular economy through collaboration across government and industrial organizations. She's been recognized as an influential environmental policy and regulation maker in Israel, and takes that active engagement with her network to promoting circular economy, both in the US, globally, and within Israel. We're very excited that she's actually being joined today by Emily Yates, who is an incredible asset for the city of Philadelphia. We're fortunate to have her in the local community, where she is the Director of Smart City PHL and an innovation manager, part of the Office of Technology and Innovation at the city of Philadelphia, where she's responsible for managing and leading the implementation of Smart City PHL, and has been providing some guidance on smart technologies, emerging solutions that can improve the quality of life for residents of the city, for businesses, and improve the delivery of social services and business services and governmental services. She has held a wide variety of positions in Europe and North America, including urban planning, along with cities in DC and Cleveland, and has worked internationally as well. So we are fortunate to have her in the city of Philadelphia. As Vered mentioned, the PICC is a very collaborative organization that reaches across government, industry, academia, and other locations to foster innovative programming like we have today. So with that, I would love to turn it over to Sharon and welcome her to the PICC event today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. And of course, thank you very much, dear Vered. I'm very excited to be invited to this event, especially which is the launching event of a super important series that I understand that will take this year. I relate to the topic, of course, personally and also professionally. So what I thought is to give just a few minutes of a talk about the circular economy, what it is actually the circular economy. So actually the circular economy is a systemic approach. It's a systemic approach to economic development designed to benefit businesses, society, and the environment. In contrast to the take, make, waste linear model, which we all know, a circular economy is regenerative by design and aims to gradually decouple growth from the consumption of finite resources. And what does it really mean? The circular economy is based on actually on three principles. First, designing out waste and pollution from the conceptualization of product cycle. For example, imagine what if waste and pollution were never created in the first place? The circular economy actually reveals and designs out the negative impacts of economic activity that cause damage to human health and natural systems. This includes the release of greenhouse gases and hazardous substances, the pollution of air, land, and water, of course. The second principle of circular economy is applying innovative and technology mechanisms, as you mentioned, Matt, which keep materials and resources in use. This is an interesting challenge and a great opportunity for innovators. A circular economy favors activities that preserves value in the form of energy, labor, and materials. This means designing for durability, reuse, remanufacturing, and recycling, all to keep products, components, and materials circulating in the economy and not wasted. And the third principle of circular economy concerns to restoration of natural ecosystems. By implementing greater use of renewable agriculture and symbiosis approaches where the result of one development stage is actually a resource for another. The circular economy tries to avoid the use of non-renewable resources and preserves renewable ones, for instance, by returning valuable nutrients to the soil to support regeneration, or for example, using renewable energy as opposed to relying on fossil fuels. So actually, those are the main principles to better understanding what does it really mean circular economy. But it's not all, because circular economy also acknowledges that we use two fundamentally distinct flows of materials. It's the biological and technical. Biological materials are those materials that can safely re-enter the natural world once they have gone through one or more use cycles, where they will be biodegrade over time, returning the embedded nutrients to the environment. On the other hand, technical materials cannot re-enter the environment. These materials, such as metals, plastics, synthetic chemicals, etc., must continuously cycle through the system so that their value can be captured and recaptured again and again. And that's the circle we are looking for. So in a circular economy, biological materials are the only ones that can be thought of as consumable, while technical materials are actually used. It makes no sense to say, for example, that we consume our washing machines and cars in the same way that we consume food. This is almost obvious, but important distinction in how we view our relationship to materials, because it raises questions about the necessity of owning products in the way that we traditionally do. For example, an organization or a big factory may ask, what benefit is there in owning all lighting bulbs when it just wants its offices lighted? It is access to the service a product provides that is important rather than the product itself or owning the product itself. So I can give you an example that the well-known Philips company, obviously you all know Philips, promotes the circular economy model by allowing customers to access products as a service. They actually developed flexible subscription services where Philips retains ownership of its product throughout its lifespan. After use, it is returned to be processed for further use. So using this model, Philips keeps the raw materials that she bought for the first place in its own ongoing production system. Of course, that means a new approach of eco-design of the products where it should be more simple to reuse and repair used products. In this way, the company benefits from saving costs of purchasing new raw materials anytime, every time, and also she gains a very important, loyal, long-term customers. It's a long-term relationship with customers because, as Philips declares, consumers too are keen to break the cycle of take, make, dispose. So understanding this shift in mindset lays the groundwork to many of the practicalities of shifting our economy from linear to circular. So actually shifting from a linear to circular economy has great economic and environmental benefits, and I would like to mention some of them. First of all, it encourages innovation and long-term sustainability. It improves competitiveness and it preserves resources, including those which are becoming increasingly scarce or subject to price fluctuations. In the pandemic, actually, we see in the industry that the raw materials prices and also the shipment of raw materials has become a big issue and very expensive. So obviously, when a company is less dependent on buying new raw materials from other countries or from far away, actually this is a very profitable for her. So circular economy is a model that eventually reduces costs and it creates new business opportunities, new jobs, and even new materials. I can mention UBQ, for example, which is an Israeli company, Israeli-based company that takes they take organic waste and they make from that organic waste, municipal organic waste, they make a new material. It looks like plastic, but they call it UBQ. This is the name of the new materials. And they always emphasize that they don't make plastic, they make a new material, which is a great example how waste can regenerate to be a material. And also, if we use UBQ instead of buying plastic, this is also a great advantage. Secondly, businesses would benefit significantly by shifting their operations in line with the principles of circular economy. These benefits include the creation of new profit opportunities, reduced costs, as I said, due to lower virgin material requirements, and stronger relationships with the customers. Now, it is also worth to mention that the transition will not only benefit businesses, the environment, and the economy at large, but also the individual, ranging from increased disposable income to improved living conditions and associated health impacts. The benefits from individuals of a system based on the principles of circularity are significant. But it is a challenge, and in order to change the economic model that we know for decades, or even a century, more than a century, there must be a systemic change. Business models, product and service design, legislation, accounting practices, urban planning, farming practices, materials extraction, manufacturing, and more, all currently have undesirable qualities from a circular perspective. Yet we cannot change just one element of the existing system and expect the change we need. Systems change is difficult to achieve, and great ideas often don't come to fruition because of failures in managing of complexities involved. What we should do, though, is learn to understand how complex systems, like an economy, operate, because understanding is the first step towards creating better solutions. And this change is needed. And what I like about the circular economy is that its principles apply actually to all sectors. For example, the food system. Changing our food system, and this is obviously globally, same Philadelphia as Israel. Changing our food system is one of the most impactful things we can do to address climate change, to create healthy cities, and to rebuild biodiversity. The current food system has fueled urbanization, economic development, and supported a fast-growing population. However, this has come at an enormous cost to the society and the environment. And how can it be more circular? So actually sourcing food grown regeneratively and locally where appropriate is important. Also designing and marketing healthier food products and making the most of food. For instance, in a circular economy, organic resources, such as those from food byproducts, are free from contaminants and can safely be returned to the soil in the form of organic fertilizers. Another good example is cities, because cities play a central role in the global economy. Home to more than half of the world's population, we can say that cities are creative, innovative centers of growth. But what is the city's part in the change? So I think, Matt, that the real expert from Philadelphia municipality is the right person and the right time to tell us about that. So I will stop here and thank you very much for listening. And I'm here for further discussion.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Sharon. And Emily, I'd love to hear that perspective as well. And just to add from Permit's perspective, it is such a challenge to deal with system-wide changes. It's not any one particular vertical that can tackle circular economy issues. It does take involvement of many, many stakeholders. And for that, we're very grateful that the city of Philadelphia has taken a lead in North America and is a great partner in these programs. So Emily, taking over to you, your definition of circular economy and how you see your role and the city's role in fostering that.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me. It's great to be on a panel with you, Matt and Sharon, and just learn more about what's happening in Israel. There's always lots to be learned. I'm a firm believer in not reinventing the wheel. There's amazing things happening around the world that we can learn from here in Philadelphia. So Matt did a great job of introducing me. I think one of the kind of elephants in the room that I want to address is, why is the Smart Cities Director speaking about circularity and not somebody from sustainability or the waste department? And I think one of the reasons that I'm passionate about having circularity fall under smart cities is that at the very basis, based on what we heard from Sharon, is that to transition to a fully circular economy, you need to have innovative tech and data. And that's the basis of how we approach smart cities here in Philadelphia. You know, a lot of defining of words, but the way we define smart cities very simply is the innovative use of tech and data to allow the city to more efficiently and equitably deliver services that improve the quality of life of all of our residents. And circularity clearly falls under that mandate of our program. I define, you know, Sharon took the definition out of my mouth. It's simply transitioning from a linear economy of make, use, and waste to closing the loop and keeping resources operating at their highest value for as long as possible, whether it's a material or a nutritional information, you know, nutritional component. But how can we continue to use resources and not extract them from limited pools of resources? And, you know, looking at it from a city's perspective, I think is really interesting, because one of the things we have to take into consideration is what is the role that the city can play. And a lot of that is around policy setting and creating an environment that allows innovation and companies to come in and really partner with the city to push the circular economy. And the other perspective for the city is, and the benefit of having a city participate is, not only is it about creating a better environment in the sense of greenhouse gas emissions, air quality, and whatnot, it's also about workforce development opportunities. It's about talent attraction and retention, job creation, opportunities for underemployed or underskilled or returning citizens, all of those things that are really a mandate of the city to work towards, right? So for me, one of the attractive components of circularity in smart cities is that systems change that circularity can really trigger and allow to happen in a variety of sectors. So it's not sector focused, really. We can look at a variety of systems that the city addresses, whether it's through energy, wastewater, procuring of food, transportation, you name it, and it can all be touched by circularity. So it's a really, you know, cutting edge topic. I've been following it for quite a while as it's pushed forward in Europe. And it's been really interesting to watch how it's grown in Europe as a policy priority coming from the national level of the EU. And down and trickling down into cities. And you see the Netherlands really working to actually export the knowledge they have as an export capacity around circularity. And it's interesting to think, how can that translate to the US, where we don't have that federal push, or really even state push? It's, I think, the grassroots and happening at city levels where circularity is happening in the US.
Oh, that's great. And it is an aspect where leadership has to come where it's available. And I think Philadelphia certainly has an opportunity to take a lead in a number of these places. I want to ask a question actually for both of you, because Sharon mentioned, you know, one aspect of systematic change is what changes are self-reinforcing, are promoting resiliency in terms of, you know, an example of economic stability. If a new change that promotes circularity is economically profitable, it's more sustainable and can grow, as opposed to being dependent on perhaps a one-time grant from government or private sector. I was curious to sort of address that issue of sustainability, for lack of reusing that word, but of resiliency, of how to promote systemic change in a way that will be self-reinforcing and not sort of run that risk of doing a one-time push and having those efforts peter off over time.
I can say, actually, from experience with working with industries in Israel, for example. So once they can take back, for example, used materials, they're doing this take back, and then they put it back into their process. And actually what they said, it's an example from just last week. It's a very, very big company that builds the roads for Israel. And they said, if we could not reuse the roads that are, you know, when they make new roads, they don't make them from scratch. They do like scratching from the old ones, and they take that material, they put it back into the process, and they use it. And that cuts in 40% the raw materials that you need to use if they're not recycled. So, and they say we could not be economically sustainable, profitable, if we don't use these materials again. So I think it talks to itself. It's just an economic essential, because raw materials are, we have a limited world. We have one world, and you know, they say that if in the 50 years ahead of us, we will use business as usual, the same amount of raw materials that we used already in the last 50 years, we need 3 times the world, and we don't have it. So I think this is the answer.
And just to chime in the industry that Sharon's talking about in terms of construction, the construction industry, I think we're seeing the impacts of COVID and supply chain on materials like concrete, right? And Philadelphia is going through a development boom. We have a ton of development happening here in the city, but what does that mean for the developers who have to wait to get concrete and then probably get it at a higher price, or have to change it out for other materials? And concrete's a heavily, you know, it uses a ton of carbon, right? So it's not the most sustainable material in and of itself. Well, you know, early on, and actually Nick is on here from Circular Philadelphia, when he was with the city, we partnered to do a pitch and pilot around helping the city achieve its zero waste targets. And one of the companies we went with helped us develop a construction and demolition mining tool. One of the great things about Philadelphia is we didn't have fires like Chicago or New York, where we lost a lot of housing stock and had to rebuild. We have a ton of amazing materials here in Philadelphia. So can we start to track that, create kind of a value to that, and encourage then, and this is where the city can play a part, encourage businesses to reuse that concrete. We know that there's a new ISO standard that's recently been developed for the reuse of concrete. Can we get these developers to use that and create its own kind of reinforcing regional supply chain in terms of construction and demolition waste? And there's a massive economic benefit. There's also a massive environmental benefit. And we're not as reliant on these global supply chains that are faltering in the current kind of situation. So I think if you can start to create that and make it a win-win for everybody, right? Because if we encourage or incentivize developers to use recycled material, maybe it's they're saving money on the permitting process because they get through an accelerated process, which means they're saving money there that they can invest into recycled concrete, which might be a little bit more expensive until it gets to scale that makes it more reasonable price. It creates an incentive for people to recycle and capture that in the demolition of projects and not illegal dump it in certain communities that we have here, which is a big problem as well. And so there's really this like growing ripple effect benefit. And I think that that's the way you have to start to look at the applying circularity, at least at a regional or local level, is how are we making wins for everybody? And what are those levers that we can adjust to do that?
If I may add to Emily, what Emily says is really developed, or in the Netherlands, for example, and also in Israel, we are trying to develop it. It's called the city mining, because actually you have in your own city, it's a mine, because the demolition is enormous. And for doing that, you need to do some other, it's not that easy, I know. But for example, there is, and I will ask maybe Hila, my colleague that is also online, to share the link. There's a protocol, a building protocol that they use and develop in Europe. So when you build a building, you already use a protocol, and then afterwards, when you want to demolish it or to reuse it, it's much simpler, because you can sort the materials. It's concrete, it's metal, it's wood, so you can do plastics, etc. So there's a protocol that is supposed to help all the builders to make a better use of urban mining. So this is something I think could be very, very useful to promote.
No, excellent. One thing that's great about circular economy and where we are today is the ubiquitousness of data, that collecting, storing, analyzing data has gotten a lot easier, cheaper, and just more facilitated throughout the economy. I'm just curious for both of you to sort of talk about what we can do now with this massive amount of data that we can collect from, different supply chain suppliers, from different, as consumers who we purchase from, producers where they're getting their supplies from. What this data revolution that we've really experienced only in the last decade or so, will mean for circularity and the circular economy going forward, and in bringing out new products, new innovations that couldn't be supported without that data.
So I can dive into it from the City of Philadelphia perspective. We are really about open data. It's a huge platform push that the city does. The challenge is there's a cultural change that has to be managed as well. There are still a lot of colleagues in the city that are hesitant to share data because of the fear that it'll make them look bad, or, you name it, there's a fear. So I think that there's kind of a variety of things that need to happen. I think we need to continue to create a culture or foster a culture where you're rewarded for sharing data, because that allows for people to understand more effectively what is in the waste stream that can be maximized and utilized and seen as a resource. I think part of it is that part of our waste is hauled by private haulers, and there's no mandates for them to share data or collect it in the way that we need to. So I think there's also the development of policies that require reporting at a certain way in order to work with the city, so we are aware of what's actually in the waste stream that people are collecting. And then I think I had a third thought and it totally flew out of my mind. So I'll let Sharon go on trying to think of what it was. Apologies. Sharon, if you want to carry on from your perspective,
I can keep on, and you can stop me whenever you remember. So, and for sure it will happen to me too. And I think, Matt, that data is the opportunity and the challenge. And it's, I think, in all sectors, everything that we do in life, each one in his profession, dealing with data or keeping on date with all the data that each one of us has on his professional day life is a big challenge. Talking about circular economy, the challenge is bigger. Why? Because to get the systematic, we're talking about a systemic change. A systemic change tackles all stakeholders, the whole supply chains. You want to close the loop, but in the loop, you have the consumers, the producers, the distributors, the municipality, the government, etc. And then you need, okay, so let's say you gathered all the information and people cooperate. Actually, I think today people cooperate more, and gathering data is not the big problem, not today. But the big challenge is how to sort the data and how to, because we have too much and we need to find the way. And I assume that in the end, it will be, as in any other professionality or sector, it would be the artificial intelligence that will help us to manage the data and to help us to close the loop and to make the cooperation between different stakeholders that are required to really make the systemic change and to go from a linear economy to a circular one. It's a global change. It's sophisticated. But using artificial intelligence for sustainability, not just for circular economy, is something that is very, very talked about in Israel. I'm sure that also in the United States. Because if we talk about, for example, smart cities, obviously, if you have data about how your citizens behave, at what hours certain citizens walk in the street, and what are the hours that nobody's there, so you don't need the lighting, for example. You don't need the lighting, you don't consume energy, you have less expenses as a municipality, you can give the citizens something else instead. So this is the cycle.
So I remembered. Thank you. But you teed it up perfectly, because you're saying music to my ears in terms of AI and machine learning. Those are critical technologies to circularity. But I think also a burgeoning one that is will be valuable and will not go away potentially as much as I want it to, but is blockchain. And I think blockchain for transparency in supply chains will be critical, especially in supply chains like textiles, where you're really wondering where your textiles originated, what their makeup is, and then kind of where they go throughout the whole chain. But to your point also, Sharon, you know, and a great opportunity for me to share the two Israeli companies that we are currently partnering with. One is Juganu, which is a smart street sensor that we've deployed on a corridor here in Philly. And right now it's just capturing pedestrian movement. So we're trying to understand how many pedestrians are passing by the streetlights at a certain time, vehicle movement, and then environmental. And, you know, to that point, can we expand it to start to understand how people are using our public space and align that with opportunities for applying circularity? The other one is Zen City, which has been an amazing partner in tracking sentiment through publicly available data. All of this is done, by the way, not using PII. We're very serious about privacy here in Philadelphia and want to only collect as much data as we need and do it in the most secure and private way possible to ensure that we're maintaining that standard of trust with our community. But Zen City does an amazing job of pulling sentiment around certain topics. So based on keywords, people push out via Twitter, social media, news channels, you name it. And so can we use that to also get a better and clearer understanding of how our community feels around sustainability, what the equity issues are as we move forward with circularity, right? I think that's a big challenge that we're going to be facing, especially in Philadelphia, where I'm sure everybody on this call who's in Philly knows we have 25% of our population living at or below federal poverty level, which is a huge challenge when you're trying to get people, when you're engaging with people who are on a day-to-day basis of just trying to survive, let alone getting them think about how can they repurpose certain materials as a resource or an opportunity. And then our aging population, which is going to be something coming up in the smart city space as well, is how do we navigate circularity and sustainability for a community, the silver tsunami, as they're calling it, much to my parents' disappointment. But how do we start to think about that as we're deploying technologies and trying to achieve a circular transition?
No, that's great, Emily, in terms of the equity and the context for equity in Philadelphia is different than other areas and other locations. And Sharon, I guess it's sort of something that's been very much talked about, that it's sort of the wealthier Western European countries that have been leading a lot of the circular economy conversation, for better or for worse, and the impact that that's going to have on economies with lower incomes and other producers of raw materials or exporters of raw materials. I am curious sort of how you see that conversation around equity between the EU and Israel and the US and the other consumers, other producers, other economies that'll be impacted on a positive and perhaps negative side, moving towards circularity.
Yeah, I think just as to start with, I think, I don't know if everybody here, you mentioned before, but as a lawyer, I feel I have to give a disclosure that Emily and I didn't talk before about the Israeli example about the lighting technology. So it was like by coincidence. This I wanted to say. And talking about the influence between Europe, United States, Israel, and I think it would be a global change. I can tell you that we had a visit from Chile, for example, just last week. There was a mission from Chile and they came to meet us with the Chilean ambassador in Israel. Because Chile, and actually at first we didn't understand why they want to meet us, the Israeli Circular Economy Stakeholders Platform, and then we started to do a small research about Chile, and then we saw that Chile, except that they have a Circular Economy National Plan that holds 90 pages, didn't read it all, but Chile is an expert of lithium, and lithium is what everybody uses in their phones and also in the energy sectors, for example, in the talking about renewables. So for example, for us in Israel, the solar system is very, very important, and we want to make more solar energy, but we have sun, even that we are the innovation nation, we have sun only by the day. We didn't find a way to have sun at night. So we need to find a way to keep the energy throughout the night. For that, there are certain batteries, and the batteries are lithium based. So if we want, we'll start to work by a circular economy model, we will buy less and less lithium. We will find a way to reuse this lithium and buy it from Chile less times. And this is very fundamental for Chile's economy, and they understand that. And talking about the influence of Europe, Europe has their directives already set towards circular economy. They build, actually the directives build the marketplace, because for example, they have this eco-design directive. By the eco-design directive, they actually say to the producers how to build the batteries, the televisions, the cellular phones in a way that they can be reused and the materials can be recycled and reused. Obviously, the nations that sell these materials will be affected from that. And so the change will be global and the effect of Europe will be global. And just another example, because Emily talked about the people that are the poverty in Philadelphia. So I wanted to share an example from France, also from Europe, from France. They just had this new, they call it the circular economy law, but actually, formally it's not called this way, but the law says that if one has, like it's a supermarket or a restaurant or an organization, they have excess food, they cannot throw it away. They have to move it to somebody that will use this food. And this is, when I read this, this law, obviously translated to English, when I read it, the first thing I thought about is that it requires a technology that can do the connections between the organizations that have access food and the other stakeholders that need it. And obviously, I think municipalities will take an important part in this. So this is just to connect, to close the loop of the discussion.
No, that's a great example. And in Philadelphia, we have been doing a fair amount. Philabundance has been doing some upcycling is the term we use locally for waste food. And, you know, it fits because in some ways there's different value propositions we have. I mean, we have or had a biodigester that was potentially coming into Philadelphia that was looking at different waste streams that would be feeding that biodigester. And obviously, you know, it's better to divert from, you know, from the waste stream if we can. But the highest and best use, certainly if there's food that's edible and appropriate, it's a higher use to use that for feeding people rather than just digesting that into methane and other waste materials. But that's one that we're certainly very excited about here in Philadelphia.
Matt, can I share one of our current pilots that we have going that taps into that a little bit? That's
sure.
Like one that I get super excited about. So feel free to stop me if I talk too long. But we have a partner or a project with a company called Food Connect, which is a local organization, and they work closely with Philabundance, which is the tie-in. And basically, in conversations I had with my colleagues, we were talking about how we procure $25 million worth of food with USDA grants for Food Insecure Philadelphia. And so that's people in jails, but also members of our community that need support through food programs. Ultimately, we procure 60,000 meals a day, so 2 full meals and a snack, which means that 60,000 pieces of plastic, single-use plastic, entering our waste stream on a daily basis, in addition to the containers that the food is provided in. I learned that we don't provide food like salad to these members of our community because we don't provide silverware. And then we also procure it from a company in Brooklyn, New York, and have these shipments come in daily. And in the conversation, it was also at the same time that we were having this tension of restaurants in Philadelphia closing down because of COVID and limited ability to serve people because we weren't allowed to eat indoors and whatnot. And a large majority of those were women and minority-owned businesses. And so we started to think in a circular sense of how can we start to put these dots together to really impact that system's change, right? We have an abundance of food, as we know through Philabundance, but we also have an abundance of an amazing food culture here in Philadelphia. And can we start to take that $25 million and redefine the term best value in our procurement process? So best value in RFP process for a city just means who comes in with the lowest offer. We take it because, you know, there's never enough money to do what we want to do. But could we take this $25 million and invest it locally and take a more distributed model of not going to just one business, but can we start to tap into companies or restaurants rather, or culinary schools that agree to provide food, have it be more distributed, which means that there's less movement of the food. So we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We also can support local businesses. We can start to tap into our regional food supply. So we live in an agricultural hotspot, right? We have amazing farms an hour outside of our city. Can we start to provide culturally appropriate food and that healthier food that has higher value, nutritional value, because it's not food that needs to be stable for a number of days, right? And then can we start to look at the environmental component of it? So again, Nick from Circular Philadelphia has had a hand in helping with the reusable container policies here in the city. Can we start to work with an Israeli tech firm or TerraCycle, who's not too far away, and start to think through how can we provide these meals in reusable containers because we have the distribution points and the infrastructure, right? So this is like a bigger, longer term project that we're working on that all starts with just figuring out, can the supply meet the demand? That's where we're at in the pilot right now. And then scaling it up step by step to say, can we support local transportation companies that can deliver this food through carbon neutral means? Can we you know, support a local innovator in the creation of reusable containers and those kind of things. But that's what gets me excited about circular economy, because there's so many points for innovation in the process, but also so many points for impact, right? Can we remove the plastic from our rivers? We're surrounded by 2 rivers. Nobody wants to pollute our waterways. Can we, you know, create job opportunities? So just to kind of touch on that, food systems and where there's opportunity in the city to really capture and why we should be doing it.
Well, that's a great factor in why we're doing this on our side and why many members of the Israeli Chamber of Commerce, Philly Israeli Chamber of Commerce are pushing for this. And we've been very excited with what Vered has been able to bring in terms of resources with the Bird Foundation. So there is dollars available for grants to, you know, to facilitate research and development of technologies between Israeli and US companies. And we've seen that in a number of sectors. And I think this year's program that we're putting on is going to touch on a number of distinct verticals in the circular economy area that I'm hoping we're going to see some Bird Foundation grants from, and some expansion of, you know, business and interventions and innovation between US and Israeli companies. But next month, we're doing our packaging footprint conference, really focused on that with TIPA and TerraCycle. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and PICC has really been at the forefront of providing those opportunities for both American and Israeli companies to benefit from this innovation. And for a lot of people in this community, we have a number of very large institutions on the healthcare and education side, as well as institutional investors like ourselves and others who want to foster that innovation through any possible way. So now I really thank Sharon and Emily for being here, but I'd like to open up this panel to other people who may have questions, and we can either have those emailed to Vered, or we can raise a hand and ask them that way. But I definitely appreciate everyone's time and want to make sure if there are questions that we get those addressed to Sharon and Emily while they're still here.
Okay, everybody feel comfortable to ask questions. We encourage, you know, direct communication, and that's why this is not a webinar. We do not like webinars.
And in that downtime, I will sort of take the opportunity to plug the other work that PICC is doing, not just on packaging, but also food tech. And Emily mentioned that we have a number of very large food companies in this Philadelphia region who take some of those challenges of circular economy and sustainability. And I've been looking at a number of interesting technologies from Israel. The last time I went to Israel, we were looking at a number of food packaging companies for companies like Hershey in the US that have, by the nature of the products, generally one-use products that you normally would think fit into that take, make, waste type cycle, but are looking for ways to improve at a minimum compostability, but also other broader measures of sustainability in terms of how much petrochemicals have to go into the production of the packaging materials and other related aspects to that.
The panel talk about how the large corporate partners are contributing to the to taking on the role of sustainability in the circular economy, the Comcasts or Blue Cross Blue Shields or or larger manufacturers in our area, pharmaceutical companies. We're big. I work for Temple, so I'd like to know what the universities are doing. Could they talk a little bit about how, are we all pitching in, or is this sort of just getting started?
I'll again speak from the Philly side of things. I think that there are organizations that are thinking about it in terms of their business practices. I know I've had several conversations with Ikea, which is based in Conshohocken. Their challenge is that the mandate coming from the main Ikea in Sweden, the way that it works over there is not going to work the same way here, right? So they're starting to look at, can they do more of a regional or a local approach and then replicate it at all of their US based. I don't think it's crossed, maybe it has. In my conversations with Comcast, it hasn't crossed their plate yet in terms of what they're looking at. But I think there's opportunity with Aramark as an example. Love to partner with the universities. I know your director of sustainability quite well, and these are conversations that I've had with her. We're looking to launch a smart circular economy strategy for the city in partnership with the US Chamber Foundation and a firm out of Amsterdam as the technical assistance and support. And a critical part of that is bringing in the universities, the organizations regionally to partner, because it is not something that the city can do, right? We have to get corporate partners really kind of push that public-private partnership forward. So I think it's still, you're seeing the bigger companies like Philips that have more of a global presence pick it up. And I think there will be a market shift eventually, similar to like EVs. 5 years ago, everybody was like, EVs aren't going to take up that quick. Now you look and it's like, nobody's going to be selling internal combustion engines beyond like 2035. So I think that there will be a market shift as the supply chain challenges continue.
Thank you.
I'd like to mention that we have company Django that did a project with the city. They actually received the Bird Grant for a lighting project with the Aero Farms. So this is attainable. And there's also funding for Israeli companies, collaboration with US companies through a program that actually Temple University is managing. And Todd may provide in the link information about that, but there are opportunities for us to fund joint ventures on, especially on sustainability, food tech, ag tech, anything related to that on an ongoing basis. I would like to hear from the panelists a little bit about how circular economy could benefit smaller businesses. Of course, some of our bigger players at the PICC, like Bimbo, which is on the call, they do significant sustainability programs in circular economy. But what is it for a small business that has very little resources? How could they benefit or implement circular economy? Thank you.
I can say, if I can just add for Todd's question, I would like to say that in Israel, we founded like a circular economy forum maybe a year and a half ago. We wanted to see, to approach the big global companies that act in Israel to see how interested are they in making a change towards circularity. And actually what happened is that all big international companies and also Israeli ones attended the meetings, and they all showed some challenges that they want to solve and looking for innovators and maybe cooperations with also, as you, for various questions, maybe smaller businesses that can cooperate. And you saw them, the pharmaceutical business, because the industry, because they use a lot of packaging. So this is this most like a simple example. But you also have companies like Dow Chemicals or ICL, if you know ICL, because talking about Dow Chemicals and ICL, the global regulations about eco-design actually takes some of the materials that they use today in their manufacturing. They put it as out of the law. They will not be able to use them anymore. So they have to be innovative They have to think differently. They have to take back their, if they can, their products and change the way they produce. So you see all across the board, HP, for example, is also a big company that they want to use like different plastics. So this is all across the board of all big companies, of course, also the big retailers and everything. So this is for your questions. And I think it's not something that comes from Israel, it's worldwide. And maybe to add for that, it's not just the companies, it's also the finance sector. For example, if you think about a big company or maybe a smaller company that needs finance and she needs credit. So now the finance sector, they look at the business and they say, would this business be long lasting? Not only what is the environmental impact, talking about social development goals or environmental social governance, etc. They think about the long-lasting and sustainability of the business itself, how much it relies on raw materials, etc. How much waste does it produce? If it produces too much waste, or the waste is including hazardous materials, so something about the business is a bit problematic. So if, for example, small or medium scale businesses want to gain something or to profit from the change towards circular economy, I think they should start to think about changing their business model, rely less on raw materials, and start to think about the service model. I think, Vera, this is the question. This is the answer for your question. If it's good for Philips, for sure it will be good also for smaller companies.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to echo that. I think smaller companies have less of a capital, I have a head cold, so I'm going to blame it on this, but they have less capital to kind of live off of in moments of stress, right? So they might have 3 months runway, whereas other companies like HP and whatnot have tons of money to fall back on. So in business interest, it makes the most sense for them to be a part of this, to create a more regional supply chain that they're pulling off of, because it's less disruptive in that sense. And it makes more sense for them to kind of sustain their ongoing business, in my opinion.
No, that chicken and egg sometimes between the business and economy is why this systemic change is so challenging, because while there's investors who are willing to make long-term bets, it's not infinite, as Emily mentioned. And there's been a lot of cases where the market, the technology just doesn't quite come with the right time with government incentives and market demand. And we're huge advocates of electric vehicle transportation. And it's always going to be a shame in my mind that GM was such an innovator early on with the EV1 and had support of the California Air Resources Board, but ultimately that was about a decade too early. And with the emergence of lithium ion and some just better technology, the product became a lot more attractive for consumers. And now we have dozens of electric vehicles to choose from with what frankly is a little bit more support from CARB in California, but not a tremendous amount. It was a combination of having the right technology with the right company's product at the right time. And so that's something we're always looking for as investors. Do we have the ability to accelerate and innovate to get a technology to marketplace quicker and ideally become a first mover and get some economic advantages through that? Vered, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
This was very interesting and I hope valuable to our participants. I appreciate our speakers, Sharon and Emily, and our moderator, Matt, and everybody for joining. I'd like to respect your time and conclude this meeting event, and we will send you information about our upcoming events, as well as a recording of this event will be available on our website and in distribution. Thank you so much, everybody. And if you have interest in being connected to Israeli or local companies, please reach out to us. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.